And I think the bell just rang. It's precisely 1 o'clock. So hey, I just want to start by saying welcome to all of you for this first of our five-part webinar series. I'm Paul Klassen, and I will be your host today. So once again, welcome. As a quick background on my story, just like many of you, there have been some life experiences that led me to launch our newest edition of Pinnacle Renovations called MyLifetimeHome. And though I've been in the business of renovations for 35 years now, 25 of those in Calgary under the Pinnacle brand, I had some childhood and then some adult experiences that really shaped how we began offering accessible renovations. I know all of you have your own stories as well. So if you watch the video on your webinar invitation, you already know that my childhood heroes were my grandparents for a variety of reasons. But for me then to see first my grandfather and then later my grandmother suffer from Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and to see the level of care requirement just really impacted me. It was devastating to witness their complete loss of mobility. Decades later, two of my nephews developed debilitating illnesses, one with muscular dystrophy, the other with ALS. And again, I saw these young boys, they were late teens, early 20s, saw their suffering, their loss of mobility. And I also saw the caregiver needs of my family in retrofitting their homes for the best quality of life they could provide. So I saw my family go through all of that. So that's kind of the backstory as to why we're here today and why we began back in February to educate on this topic via a panel of experts that you're going to meet today. But just prior to COVID, that was just prior to COVID. So it was the eve of Valentine's Day in February. A month later, COVID hit, and here we are. It's been quite a journey for all of you, I'm sure. So once again, welcome. I'm going to introduce Catherine and Kathy just in a second here, but as a quick background, we hosted that first panel of experts seminar on this topic of aging in place back in February. We had a packed out audience in the Triwood Community Center. The engagement that night was just awesome. The interest in this topic was amazing. So we just felt that we just had to do a deeper dive. So here we are today with our first of our 5-part webinar series to hopefully provide you and your family, might be yourself, you might be your parents, might be a loved one. We're just going to do our best to provide objective education on your options. We encourage you to invite your friends as we start webinar number 1 with our first 3 panelists. We've got, as I said, it's a 5-part series. So for today, it's just excited about bringing these 2 ladies on. They both happen to be Kathy's for some reason, or Catharine. So interesting how that worked out. But joining us on today's webinar, we have Catharine Eckersley. She's the director of Valley to Peak Occupational Therapy Consultants, as well as Kathy Yuen, the CEO of Phase 1 Design, and myself, CEO of Pinnacle, MyLifetimeHome. So we're going to walk through those early discussions. They were part of, Catherine came in a little bit later, but Kathy Yuen was part of that seminar back in February. These are just early discussions in this webinar surrounding the viability of your current home. So we hope today's webinar will help you answer the question as to whether or not your current home could be your lifetime home. So here we go. Just as a quick housekeeping note, please type your questions into the chat line. We'll do our best to answer them after today's webinar. If we can't answer your question without our webinar timeline, we can arrange a private Zoom call with you. So we're going to try and keep this webinar to 45 minutes. It's going to be really tough. We got so much to cover. And we're at the end of this webinar, hot off the press, we have an ebook gift for all of you. That is literally, I've not released this to anybody until now, and it's going to be to our webinar guests here today. It's a 21-page book. The pros and cons of your lifetime home, remaining in your home versus moving to a villa or care home. We really tried to do this objectively. We had all of our panelists in this webinar series contribute to that ebook. So just excited to be able to offer that to you guys at the end. So here we go. Let's get started. Let's start with Catherine at Valley to Peak, and just jumping right into my first question. So Catherine, welcome here today. Thank you so much for joining us on this inaugural webinar.
Thanks for inviting me. It's good to be here.
Fantastic. So I'm just going to jump into our first kind of, I've got a few questions for you here to start for our visiting guests. But as an occupational therapist, would you mind just kind of helping us start off this series with, what would our current options be for aging in place in our homes versus moving to a public or private healthcare facility? Would you help us out on that first question?
Of course, yeah. So we're pretty lucky in Alberta, actually. We have lots of options, especially here in Calgary, depending on the level of personal or healthcare support that you require. So the main options sort of range from being the most independent to the most support. So we have options to live at home independently. That's most people's preferences. Living at home with maybe some public or private services coming in and helping out, whether it's with housekeeping or cleaning or meal preparation. We also have supported living facilities and then supported assisted living facilities specifically for people with dementia. We have long-term care. That's the one that's been in the news a lot lately. And then we have hospice and palliative care. So quite a few options. Living at home, as you can imagine, can be in your current neighborhood, or sometimes people end up moving to like a retirement community where you live independently in your own home or apartment, but there's a couple of services that are just sort of in the neighborhood, but there's no medical support. AHS provides quite a bit of free publicly funded personal and healthcare services for people to remain safe and independent in their homes as long as possible. So home care supplements care and support from the family and community services. Now, it being a public service, obviously there's only so many resources. So some people that use the AHS public support for home care top up with other private services to fill in any of the gaps. So lots of private home care companies out there, including the ones that we work with, typically providing services from meal preparation, housekeeping, laundry, medication management, running errands, grocery shopping, all of those different things, and accompanying people to medical appointments. So those are your options for sort of living at home with or without different levels of home care. Designated supported living is for people who are a bit more medically and physically stable, but they may have some type of disability that requires them to have just a bit of extra help. So they'll have healthcare aides on site, but there's not normally any nurses or rehab staff or doctors on site. Gotcha. And then for those who know about long-term care is specifically for people with more of those complex, unpredictable medical needs who require 24-hour nurses or treatment. So they may have an occupational therapist, physiotherapist, dietitian, doctors, all the specialists on site. So I've listed quite a few options. I know and that's even just like the tip of the iceberg, and it can be a bit overwhelming. But the main takeaway I'd say is that there's lots of different options. It's not just stay at home versus straight into long-term care. There's quite a bit of different options in between, depending on the level of support that you need. And if that's a bit too overwhelming, I recommend starting by looking at the AHS website. It lays out all the options really nicely and clearly. They do a great job. And there's also the Kirby Center, which I'd like to highlight. It distributes a free housing directory that includes all the public and the private options like aged care, Care West, all those private manors and retirement homes. And it's free. It's on the Kirby Center website, and you can also pick it up at Sobeys, Co-op, Safeway, and any of the Calgary libraries.
Awesome.
So there's a lot of options, but luckily AHS and the Kirby Center have done a really good job of trying to make it as easy to digest as possible by having those manuals and sites in place.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, Catherine. I think one of the things that I know I've experienced with AHS is respite and actually even hospice care. Yep. So I had two friends of mine that stayed in their homes right to end of life, and it was amazing to see the HS care for that. So that was a solution to stay in their home. And so there's a ton of options. Thank you for that. So just in light of our time, I'm going to jump into question number 2. So obviously, part of the I guess the heightened awareness of all of this and this topic is the subject around COVID. So with COVID and the highlighted concerns that we've all heard about regarding our long-term care facilities, do you anticipate more people will explore the option of remaining in their homes?
It's a great question. Obviously, COVID's changed pretty much everything when it comes to what we know about the medical field. And certainly my own parents and my own grandparents are now considering their options a bit more seriously, or they're just starting to look at it a bit earlier, which I'm finding a lot with some of my own clients. We're looking at their homes that maybe they're doing just fine right now, but we're looking at potential stair lifts, potential bathroom modifications, simple equipment that they may not need for the next couple of years or so, but they're starting to plan ahead. So I'm definitely seeing that lots of people are leaning towards looking into things now, especially unfortunately with the news coverage where, yeah, as you can see on my slide, 81% of the COVID deaths in Canada were in long-term care facilities. So long-term care, unfortunately, has gotten a very, very bad reputation lately, or in the last couple of months. So people are definitely trying to consider other options. That being said, honestly, as an unbiased third-party contractor, with the medical advancements that we have right now, people are living a lot longer with chronic and more complex medical needs. They can become too difficult for families to manage at home. So I believe that long-term care will always remain a viable option for many people, especially those that don't have family or community supports. But I'd say for the typical healthy, aging adult population with minimal medical needs, definitely they're all starting to look a bit more at aging in place in their forever home. It's a lot more of an appealing and viable option that they're starting to consider.
Right. I think that's a good point. I mean, I don't think the stat has skewed much. I think the stat has always been 8 or 9 out of 10 people would prefer to live in their home. I mean, who in this audience would sign up to go into an elder or a senior care facility? I don't think any of us really want to end up there. But like you say, there's a viable component there that it might just be the right fit for some, for sure. Absolutely, and for many, I might add. So jumping into my last question here then, just in terms of that topic. So what would you recommend for people who are considering staying in their homes? I mean, that's quite a challenging question itself, but some might be thinking of more immediate, they may be older and in terms of age, or they might have a disability that is a little more pressing. Others may think about this in a couple of years or decades. What would your advice be on that side?
Yeah, it's definitely never too soon to start looking into it. The unexpected can happen at any time, obviously with COVID. Generally what I do, or I recommend to people, is to think about what you think your future might look like. What does your home look like? So without going too morbid with it, I ask people to imagine just having a bit less energy. What if you had a really, really bad flu? What if you broke a bone or had difficulty being able to go up and down the stairs, or needed a cane or a walker? So nothing too extreme, but just thinking about your energy and mobility. What if that has impacted? And then really taking a good look at your home. So how do you enter your home? Do you go, are there stairs? Are there railings? Do you have a long pathway? Is it steep? If you couldn't shovel the snow, could you safely access your home? And then inside the home, the main areas that people get stuck are the bathroom. Definitely I'd look in the bathroom really and have a good critical view of that. And just think, like, if you only had enough energy to be mobile in your home for maybe 10, 15 minutes, can you reach the areas of the home that are most important to you? Is your bedroom too far from the bathroom? Can you reach things in the kitchen? So really critique your home. And then, since your home obviously isn't an island, critique your neighborhood. Are there essential daily and medical services nearby, like within a 5 to 15 minute drive? Can you get groceries? Are you in a hilly area, a rural area? Do you live near transit? One of the things that people probably aren't thinking about right now, because it's beautiful outside, is what about the winter? How well maintained are your roads by the city in the winter? Are there days where the snowplows don't come by for a day or two, and then you're trapped at home? So just thinking about your home and your neighborhood as a whole picture, and really sort of identifying any barriers. And then really at that point, I'd recommend consulting with the experts, whether it's an occupational therapist, a contractor, home care agencies, just a double check to see if anything's been overlooked. And also, obviously, using professionals, it means more access to funding, community supports, and it creates a more well-rounded approach to aging in place. You might have overlooked some of the mental or psychosocial or economic needs that that you may have. So take your time, do your research, and if there's no immediate concern, definitely start thinking about it now. That's why we're talking about it today. So you've already done the first step. Congratulations. I strongly recommend being proactive rather than reactive, if possible, of course. There's more options, there's less stress. You generally save quite a bit more money because you have more time to look around and shop out different prices and quotes. And it's just a more enjoyable and successful experience if you're able to plan ahead. So start thinking about it now. You don't have to start doing anything, but at least start thinking about it.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's really good advice, just to be proactive. I know we always talk in terms of crisis versus proactive. Operating out of a crisis position is never fun. And so proactive, like you say, you can get proper consulting, proper design, and proper budgets put together. So thank you for that, Catherine. Really appreciate you coming on board. I want to just let everybody know that Catherine's website is valleytopeak.ca, so www.valleytopeak.ca. If you have any consulting requirements or wondering just some questions, Catherine is a wonderful professional. That said, she is going to have a little one fairly shortly.
Soon.
Something you can't all see, but Catherine is about to be a mom, so she will be taking a little bit of time to nurture that little one. But by all means, I think you're going to be active through all of that in terms of website and email. So do reach out. Yes. Yeah, sounds good. Well, thanks, Catherine.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, feel good for you to be part of this series and offer your insight as an occupational therapist. Some great tips from your expertise perspective for attendees today. So thank you. Just jumping right into our next segment of today's webinar, I'm going to invite Kathy Yuen of Phase 1 Design to join us, as she has a few questions for me, apparently, before I turn over to her. But again, thank you for joining us, Kathy, not Catherine, Kathy. And just great to have you here. So Kathy from Phase 1 Design. Yeah, apparently you have a few questions for me to start with today.
Yeah, actually I do, Paul. So first of all, it's great to be here. Thanks again, Paul, for inviting me to be here today. Paul and I have worked together for years and years and years and years, just on, renovations and design builds together. So it's great to be here and collaborate on this. So I guess I'll just kind of dive right in, just in the interest of today's topic, which is surrounding the planning of an aging in place home. Maybe Paul, tell us, in the earlier stages of discussion, how would you help a family determine the viability of their current home?
Yeah, great question, Kathy. And then that's the whole context, as you said, of today's webinar. It's the first of our 5-part series, but that viability question. So it really all comes down to whether they are the family member or friends, I guess, have a current disability, or are they, as Catherine Eckersley just mentioned, are they proactively planning for gracefully aging in place, as we all are gracefully aging, aren't we? But from there, we follow a questionnaire guide that covers topics like, so I've just brought the slide up here of our analysis. And I know that Kathy, you have discovery analysis, as is Catherine, you have your checklist. We all do. But this is kind of how we start. So how many years? One of my first questions is, how many years, if you had your wish list, how many years would you like to stay in your home? Would you like this to be your forever home? Some of our clients tell us, Paul, the only way we're leaving this home is in a pine box. So we call it the Pine Box Project. We're staying here forever, literally forever. So, if you jump over to kind of the breadth of accessibility they want to incorporate, might be simple visitability. So they really got to assess, is their current home well suited to become their lifetime home? So it might be visitability. For example, you might have a friend or family member that has even a small disability that you want to just make your home more visitable, or it's a serious disability, so you want to really plan accordingly, or it's proactive planning for you. So the other thing that I talk a lot about is the broader spectrum in terms of proactively aging in place, is the progressive illness or is it a disability? So progressive illnesses, as Catharine knows as an OT, have a very different perspective. So we like to bring an OT in to fully evaluate that perspective and assess the current and future needs, because really a progressive illness really in terms of that statement, a progressive, only an OT or a healthcare professional will truly know what that will look like and how that will progress and what those needs should look like. So we start with that, and then we start discussing the viability of their home plans. I always say, starting with the bungalow as our kind of our first case study here, we always say you've won the lottery if you own a bungalow. It's the easiest to retrofit. So as a designer, you know this, Kathy, I mean, there's a lot of value to a bungalow for sure.
Absolutely.
So yeah, in this case, this particular home was a bungalow. This client was a young lady that was in a challenged position as a disability. But she was looking for a home, couldn't find one for love of money. She finally found this bungalow, but it was a 3-bedroom, horribly outfitted for their home. So they brought us in, and we converted a 3-bedroom to a 2. So that is maybe not everybody's option, but it was for this client, and converted that to a full ensuite. And it's a full roll-through shower. It's fully accessible, 48-inch barn door. The doorways were all widened. If you click on the next slide there, the doorways were widened. It was just now visitable. It was gorgeous. I think the project turned out gorgeous, but you can see the framing picture on the left there. That used to be a bedroom. So we created that roll through ensuite, gorgeous 48-inch rolling barn door that just really allowed that accessibility. So the other question a lot of people ask me is, can my 2-story be accessible? Well, in this case study, if you look at this home, one of the challenges I give to a lot of people is, what do you see about this home that looks accessible or looks medicinal or institutional? And the answer invariably is nothing. And that's exactly our point. One of our next webinars coming up, I think the second or third one in our series, is going to talk about how to ensure that your home remains gorgeous, not institutional if it's retrofitted. So this case study was kind of quite a story. So this particular client, halfway through, serendipitously, however you want to say that, this gentleman started showing signs of early dementia. And we actually had to pivot on a dime. He did not have any symptoms, any recognized symptoms when we started the design, but kind of into the Reno early weeks, it just became evident certain things were happening. So we sat down with the missus and really worked through this. So we were able to develop a main floor, completely accessible, wider hallways, 36-inch doorways, accessible bath on the main floor. And was just proactive thinking on the spot. We literally pivoted. We all know that word in COVID, but we pivoted on a dime to kind of pull this together. And wow, fortuitously, that gentleman's mobility really began to diminish over the next year or two. So as I show you that next slide, what actually happened is a year later, we came back to attach their detached garage to their home with a fully ADA compliant ramp with a privacy screen that created a patio. So again, we're trying to mask the fact that it's a ramp, but it is a beautiful ramp, and it's now privacy screen for gorgeous patio. So those are some of the things we do, and we jump into another case study in terms of elevators. This particular couple on the far left is a young couple, young in heart, lovely couple. And they just got the COVID news. We are actually midway through this project. You can see the center pictures are framers on site framing a 3-stop elevator on all 3 floors. And the right-hand picture is not these people being reverted back to young folks. It's not the same couple. It's a model, but the stilts elevator behind them is what we're installing. So it's it was quite a challenging project. We had ductwork in the way, wiring, you can see all the wiring in the way. There was a lot of workarounds, but they are so excited. Their elevator is showing up. Everything's framed, everything's done, it's buttoned up, elevator showing up the end of this week. So they are just tickled. So that again is how we address can a two-story be retrofitted, I guess is the answer. So sorry for the long answer here, Kathy. One more thing I'll mention is budgets. Though not at the top of our clients list, typically because it's the care or the proactive element. They want to remain in their house for life. They know we call it ROL, return on lifestyle. It's not just ROI, return on investment. They're investing in their life, not just looking at their bottom line and saying, oh my goodness, I'm spending all this money. I mean, I could go into a conversation in terms of what costs care for our cost run for a villa or
Yeah,
project.
absolutely. Well, and actually, Paul, I think since you mentioned it, I think, those photos were beautiful, by the way, and all those homes were beautiful renovations. I think anytime anybody sees photos like that, everyone in the back of their mind is wondering, what's the budget for some or all of those elements? Can you maybe speak a little bit to that, and just including, some of the pros and cons of that? Doing something like that in your existing home and doing a renovation compared to moving into a villa or a care home, the cost comparison.
Yeah, absolutely, Kathy. And so you can see the quick math on moving. Before I jump into my next slide, I'll just share that quickly. These are average costs. As you can see, I don't think refurnishing a villa or care home and purging is going to cost 10 grand. I think it's going to cost a lot more than that. But depending on your taste, of course, that could be one chair, depending on where you're shopping. But that's just some quick math on moving costs. So that's just the starting point. So if we jump to the next slide, I am going to bring out just the cover page of our pros and cons doc, which is our ebook we're going to be giving away to all of our attendees here today. So without spoiling the tease of that book, I'm just going to say that the last copy of that, the last page of that is a full cost guide. So if you jump down to the next slide, there's a full cost guide that I'm not going to share on the screen here, but it goes through all of the cost comparisons for something as simple as handrails, faucet changed levers from knobs to levers, all the way up to a full-blown addition and three-story elevator.
And don't worry, Paul, I'm not going to ruin your surprise, but I will say I have actually personally seen it, and it's actually a really, really great resource. So maybe you can just wrap up by sharing with everybody how they get access to this.
Yes, fantastic. So our website is MyLifetimeHome.ca. So that's the general resource for everything we're talking about today. But the ebook will be available to all of you attendees at the end of today's webinar. So stick around to the end. This is I would just say it's literally, because it was the culmination of all of our panelists' input. There are some great topics there, and some great advice, some great cost comparisons. And I think it's just going to be a great resource for everybody on the webinar today.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, so answer is at the end of our webinar today, we're going to have that for you to download.
Perfect.
So yeah, so thank you for those questions, Kathy. Did I answer them okay?
You did, yeah, you answered them great. Absolutely.
Sounds good. Awesome. So we're going to segue back over to you. You challenged me a lot on some of those, but it was a lot of fun. I'd like to switch over now to your area of expertise and the many years you've been designing new homes and renovations. Again, the context of this webinar is to help our visiting guests truly understand, is their home a true candidate for their lifetime home? And we all know that some circumstances may eventually take a turn and they have to end up in a senior care center. That's just the inevitable of some cases. But let me segue now, Kathy, to a few questions from your context on our topic today in identifying the viability of our webinar guests and their home. But I want to start by saying how immensely dependent we as builders and renovators are on great designers. I mean, honestly, we could not do what we do. I mean, I'm dangerous on design. I walk in, I tell my clients, I know enough to be dangerous. I can give you some insight. But wow, the pop that you guys give. I always say, as the old saying goes, location, location, location. In the world of creating a lifetime home, it's design, design, design. So Kathy, I know you specialize in residential design, both in new builds and renos. So let's talk about those two options. If I'm a homeowner looking for an aging in place home, let's say I'm considering a renovation, how do you know? I'm just amazed when I see you walk into a home, the ideas that are immediately churning. You've got this thing, you kind of get a lot of things figured out at the onset. How do you know if a renovation will provide you everything you need?
Oh, thank you, Paul. Very, very kind words. Thank you. And you know what, it's a really, really great question. And a lot of people ask us this question where, you know, we, like you say, we show up on site and they say, okay, you know, is my home worth renovating? Can it be renovated? What would the design look like? All along those lines is what we normally get asked right when we first walk in. And to be honest, the answer to that question is very, very specific to every situation. So there's not really a one size fits all answer. But what I'm going to do today, I'm just going to share some tips with everyone where these are the top 3 things that we as designers, when we go into a home, there are certain things that we always look for and to see if a renovation can actually meet the needs of that particular client, and specifically in regards to aging in place in this particular scenario. So I guess maybe just starting with the first slide there, it's on the next slide. So the first consideration is location. So, you know, we've all heard that saying, real estate is all about location, location, location. It's still the same thing with renovations. So I always say that you can always change the house. Like, and what I mean by that is with the renovation, but you can never change the location. And Catherine touched on that a little bit earlier. So you need to make sure that you're in a location that not only you love, but it actually has access to all the amenities that you need access to. So even simple things like, you know, your grocery store, if there's any services that need to be close by. So just kind of really take a close, hard look at all those different amenities that you want to be close by and just see how that relates to your actual current location. The part of aging in place is actually staying where you are. So you actually also need to make sure, on top of just the amenities, that you actually, you know, emotionally love where you are. And obviously that's going to mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Sometimes we walk into homes and we talk to homeowners that, you know, raise their families in these homes and they don't want to leave. And there's like no way that they're leaving this location because there's so many memories and emotions tied to this house. So that's great. But yet on the flip side, we talk to other clients that are, you know, empty nesters, and they decide, hey, you know, maybe we're going to move back into the city, or maybe they're vice versa, move out onto an acreage. But whatever that lifestyle that they desire to have, basically forever, and as they progress in their home, they need to consider that, and you need to consider that. Everybody needs to consider that in part when they're actually considering whether or not they want to renovate. The other thing I want to point out too, and again, Catherine alluded to this, a lot of people, when they think of renovations, they think about the inside of their house, but think about how you actually get into your house. And what I mean by that is your lot flat? And if, you know, God forbid in the future, if you needed to, you know, have wheelchair access or something like that, is that something that's easily doable where you are? Or are you, you know, climbing half a flight of stairs to get to your front door, which might make it a little bit more challenging to retrofit that with a ramp later. So just considerations like that. So don't just look at inside your house, look around your house and make sure that it is actually accessible and conducive to converting it into something that is accessible if it's not already. So that's the first consideration, location, location, location. The second consideration is square footage. So this one's a little bit trickier, but I'm just going to share a few tips with you. So square footage, obviously you want to make sure that you have enough square footage to do whatever it is that you need, both from a functional standpoint, really, really important, obviously the function of the house, and aesthetically as well. That's always like the 2 major elements of getting the right design. So when it comes to renovations, often what we see is when we first walk into a home, you know, there's a huge long wish list, and then there's whatever is there in terms of square footage. So what I would encourage everyone to do today is look at their home and don't forget about all the interior walls. Just look at more like the outside shell and say, okay, how much square footage do I have to work with? And then compare it against the wish list and say, okay, can I get everything on my wish list within this square footage? And if you can, that's great. And then if you cannot, there are also other options. You might need to start looking at things like additions, and that gets a little bit more complicated with bylaw and everything like that. So that's kind of your 2 different options when it comes to looking at square footage. So either working within your existing footprint or adding to your existing home. Now, the one thing I do want to share along those lines is typically when we're actually brought into home, and actually, to be honest, this literally has happened probably, I would say, at least 5 times in the last like couple of weeks, just looking at clients' homes where we've walked in and the clients swore up and down, hey, I need a renovation and an addition. So something to remember is anytime you're going outside the building envelope, like your current foundation, you are adding quite a significant amount of cost. So if you can actually keep everything within your existing footprint, you're going to save a lot of money. So as a designer, we can walk in and often we say, okay, you actually don't need this addition. Your house is just dysfunctional in terms of where the square footage is sitting. So there's a lot of things that we as professionals can come in and help just rearrange smarter floor plan, so you don't need to incur the additional costs of an addition. But again, for everybody listening today, the messaging is look at your square footage and just making sure that you can actually satisfy all the requirements on your wish list. Okay, and then last but not least, moving on to the third thing that we always consider when we're actually looking at a home and to see if it's a good candidate for renovation is, I call it the bones of the house. So the bones of the house is essentially what a lot of people don't really look at because it's all behind the drywall. So it's really the shell and the structural integrity of the home. And we look at this in the context of design. So for example, most of the homes that we renovate have walls that we're moving around. I would say, 99% of a renovation is moving walls around. Sometimes we walk into a house, the structure is great, and we can facilitate a renovation, no problem. Move walls around and structure fairly easily. But then on the flip side, there are times when we walk into a home and yes, technically we can move the wall because in the world of structural engineering, really anything can be done. But the real question is, the more structural engineering you do, that comes at a cost, so it doesn't make sense to actually even start moving structure around. Especially if you're looking at things like retrofitting an elevator, it's really important to understand how the bones and the structure of your home can be modified. So again, for this one, I would recommend, consulting with a designer and or builder and also an engineer, which the designer would typically bring on, just to understand how easily or not easily it is to actually modify your home for a renovation.
Awesome. Those were three great points. And because I've worked with you so many years, I know how that all integrates. And you're right. I've had the same experience as you have, that somebody thinks they need an addition because I just want all these amenities. And after you sit down, it's not near as big an addition or no addition just because their current footprint does work. So thank you for that, Kathy. That was really insightful. Let's flip over because you're also a designer for new homes. In fact, I'd say probably the weighted percentage is likely more new homes and infills and so forth. And your stuff is amazing. But let's speak to that side of it. What about if you wanted to build a new aging in place home from scratch, like build a custom home inner city or an acreage? You and I have been involved in one not too long ago in Varsity where it became evident this home was not going to work. They loved their location back in the golf course. So we took it down and we started over, and it turned out phenomenal. It's amazing. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm going to answer the same question the way I answered the first question, which is there is no one size fits all magical answer because every scenario is very different. But in the interest of just sharing, I'm going to share my top 3 tips of what everybody should consider if they are considering renovation versus new build. So the first thing is I'm going to call it location, but when I say location in the context of a new home, I'm actually referring also to the lot, because typically when you build a new home, you are working with a brand new lot, whether it's inner city and you're tearing down a house, or a blank lot where you're out on an acreage, but you're basically starting from scratch where there's no existing house to work with. So obviously with a new build, you can choose anywhere that you want. So that's a huge benefit. So if you want to be close to family or on a lake, get away from the hustle and bustle of the city, there's tons and tons of choices of what and where you can actually build your home. The one thing about this though is, and I will caution everybody, is whenever you are doing a new build, you just need to make sure that you know what you can actually build on the lot. So every lot is subject to the regulations from the municipality. So whether it's in the city or MD of Rockview or wherever, there's going to be rules and regulations that you actually need to follow in order to get permits. You need permits for renovations as well, but in the world of new home design, there's just more constraints that you need to make sure you follow. So what I always like to say for this particular piece is there's 2 pieces of advice I will give you. First and foremost, have a wish list of everything that you want. And then when you actually consult, I always say consult with a professional designer. So we do this for a lot of our clients, even before they buy a lot, where we take a look at their wish list and we say, okay, based on your wish list, here's the lot criteria that you need to be looking for. So we essentially give them a shopping list and we say, okay, look for lots that fit this criteria. And if there's any of these red flags on the lot, just walk away because you can't build what you want. So that would be the first consideration, is just making sure, again, that you understand what you can build. And because obviously you don't want to be purchasing a lot and then finding out later that you can't build what you want. So that would be consideration number one. The second consideration is what I call design flexibility. So obviously with a new build, you can do pretty much anything that you want. You're not constrained by the footprint of an existing home as you typically would be on a renovation. The one thing that I love, so I love sun, and I would actually, this is something that gets forgotten in a lot of design, is the sun pattern. So it's really simple. Where does the sun rise and where does the sun set? And I think we can all agree that we love to have a ton of natural light in any space that we have. It just makes a space feel better and just more beautiful. And you just want to be in that more. I don't think I've ever met somebody that said to me, Kathy, design us the darkest house in the world. So nobody ever says that. Everybody wants natural light. So in the context of designing and building a new home, like when you're actually doing it from scratch, is you can actually pick and choose not only the lot, but where you actually place certain rooms. So what I mean by that is you say, okay, well, I want to, wake up in the morning and have, beautiful east facing light come through my master bedroom window. Well, and if you're doing a brand new build, you can do that. You can literally design your floor plan however you want. So that is kind of more like just like a bonus I want to share with everybody here. And if you are looking at going down that road of building a new home, I would highly encourage you to, don't forget where the sun rises and sets when you're actually looking at purchasing a lot. The other thing I wanted to touch on with regards to design flexibility, and Paul, I think you mentioned that earlier, or you did mention it earlier, is I love the flexibility on a new build of being able to pick between doing a bungalow or a two-story. So this, I will caution you, if you are building in inner city Calgary, just be super careful because obviously you need to make sure your lot size will facilitate and be conducive to a bungalow design. But if you're building new, you can build whatever you want and design whatever you want. So you do have the option of doing a bungalow, a two-story, or we actually do a lot of designs where it's a 1.5 story. So, 99% of your living is like, say, on the main floor. And then we do, a loft for, if the grandkids come over, they have like an extra room to stay and play. So that is another benefit of actually designing a new home. And last but not least, I had one other point here. Oh, right. I wanted to bring this up as well. Higher ceilings. In terms of design flexibility, when you do new build, you typically will always be able to get, right now, everything is pretty much like a 10-foot high main floor. You will get that on a new build. Unless you renovate the ceiling height on an older home, you are not going to get that higher ceiling height. So I just wanted to point that out as just a consideration. If that's important to you, then yeah, that would be a consideration when you're comparing reno versus new build. All right. So
Awesome.
last but not least,
Yeah, you got one more item to cover there. Yeah.
So site design flexibility. So again, I touched on this, so I'll just make this one really quick. So just as more people are valuing outdoor living more, just the orientation of, the sun pattern versus the house.
Yes, absolutely. And I was going to mention your, I've seen that software in action, the sun pattern software, and it's cool because you can see the orientation of your home season to season. So as the sun moves south to north to south, or vice versa, you can see that pattern and how your sun will be captured by your solar gain and your windows and all of that. So it's great software, and yeah, that's the benefit of new build for sure. Thanks for sharing that, Kathy. We talked about a lot here, but let's just maybe summarize for our audience. Someone who's looking to live in an aging in place home, what's kind of the first step that they can take to explore options, and what does it cost? How long does it take? If you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of a summary on this.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's actually pretty simple. I mean, Paul, you and I do these often where, if someone is interested in going down that road, typically Paul and I will come out, take a look at your space. And usually it's like, 1 to 2 hour meeting. There's a lot of discussion on site, but by the time we actually walk out of that meeting, typically the homeowner will have a really clear idea on like overall scope direction. Like, okay, is this a viable project? Does it make sense? I speak to the design. Often I sketch. I really like to sketch, on site, just to, communicate the design intention. And then Paul, you're great because you always speak to the cost side, because obviously we need to understand what the budget is. So the cost for that initial consultation is free. We don't charge for that. And often though, what will happen is after that consultation, if we want to start doing some more preliminary sketching, the cost is actually quite low, like even just to kind of get to that first iteration of design. Like you're looking at, anywhere from $500, if you want me to throw out numbers, $500 to, $3,000, depending on how extensive or not extensive you want us to go. And how long does it take? I think was your last question. That first step can be as quick as, 1 to 4 weeks. So, and then from there, if you want to continue the process, obviously every project's a bit different, but within that first meeting, we'll give everybody a time frame overall of what that whole process would look like for their individual project.
Yeah, I know you've got an awesome scheduler, and the way your SOP, your standing operating procedures goes, it's very systematic, and it's awesome just seeing the chart, the timelines and checklists and all of that. So I mean, we've covered a lot here today, both Kathys, Catherine and Kathy. It was awesome to have both of you ladies on, and of course the integration of your two skill sets is so powerful, because I think you both mentioned it. I really like that emphasis you gave on the exterior element of how do you get in. Now, I mean, as a builder, it's up to me to come up with the solutions. So we're going to have some of those folks on the next webinar talking about lifts and ramps and so forth that can take that 5-step rise or bungalow that looks non-accessible at the onset, can quickly make it accessible. So there's all kinds of solutions out there, but today we've certainly covered a lot that kind of intertwine, your two professions intertwine a lot. So thank you for being as objective. I really wanted to keep this very objective. Something I forgot to mention on my earlier notes with our housekeeping was our chat box. So we have a chat line, and we are going to take questions from you folks. So I just do want to make sure that everybody has a chance. If you wouldn't mind throwing a question, if you have one for any of the panelists here today, we'd be happy to do that. So fire off those. I'm just going to summarize today's event. As I said, that wraps up our first webinar of our 5-part series. We got so much more to cover. We've got so many awesome folks coming on board in the next four webinars. But thank you so much for your interest in this all important topic. Thank you for joining us. I think, as we mentioned, COVID certainly has brought a greater intensity, if you will. But there's also some great items out of that ebook, which is my next point. Don't forget to ask for your free copy of that, on the pros and cons of staying in your lifetime home or moving to a villa or care home. So there's a lot of things to consider. I think this ebook will really give you a checklist. I call it the Ben Franklin list: the reasons why, the reasons why not. So use that pros and cons doc as your resource. So I'm going to suggest you ask for that. Our next webinar, just to give you a heads up, next Wednesday. So we've got these all consecutive Wednesdays, all at 1 o'clock. Invite your friends. Love to have you come with your friends into the next version of this. But our next webinar will be a fabulous array of finance options. We have an amazing lineup of pros, from Axiom Mortgage to BMO to Normative Financial. These folks are going to come with some non-conventional finance strategies for you, your parents, or your loved ones, and they're very unique. Now, some of you that are more educated, I suppose, on finance, maybe you might understand some of these, but some aren't. We're going to dispel some myths. I think it's just going to be a fabulous webinar. So that's next Wednesday. So see you next Wednesday, same time. Invite your friends. And on behalf of Catherine from Valley to Peak, Kathy from Phase One Design, and myself for My Lifetime Home, thank you for joining us today. As I mentioned, I forgot to mention Kathy's website, phaseonedesign.ca. That's there, so please reach out to her. All their contact information is on the site. So again, our contact information are in the chat box for you to link. And as I said, we have that free, I'm just going to see if we have that on the chat. It looks like we have that on the chat. Give me 1 second. Yes, so the download is there, and I believe there's a PDF file there as well. So if anybody has a question for any of us here, love to hear from you. If not, we're just going to sign off and see you all next Wednesday. But again, Catherine and Kathy, thank you so much. You guys were awesome. I think we got some great information here today. Thanks you all for joining us. It's been an awesome first of 5. Catherine, any parting comments?
No, just want to thank everybody for joining, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone again in session 3 when I come back on.
Indeed. Yeah, because you two are both actually coming back for
We are.
for an encore.
Yep.
For
I'll see you
different.
guys next week, I think it is.
Yes, exactly. And thank you, Kathy. Any parting comments from you, Kathy?
No, I just wish everybody the best of luck on their projects and reach out. Don't be shy. We're all here to help you through your journey. I know that it's a lot of information, so definitely reach out. We have an amazing team with a lot of reasons.
Yes, indeed. And thank you for that one last point. We are going to do our best to make this available through electronic version on YouTube as well. Just give us a little bit of time to get those uploaded, but hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll have that kind of coming out. But I believe today's event, if I'm not mistaken, was also on Facebook Live. So that may be archived there as well. So that's on our Pinnacle website. So that's pinnaclerenovations.ca, but Pinnacle group on Facebook. Anyway, thank you all. Thank you, panelists. And we'll sign off. Have an awesome week.
Bye.
Thanks.
Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Bye-bye.